All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jackie Pitone, and I'm a career development counselor. And we are really excited to have you today for our Ask Me Anything on resumes and cover letters. And I'll let Nadira introduce herself as well.
Yes, good afternoon now. We've crossed over that midday hump. So good afternoon. My name is Nadira Pippin. I am the director of the Career Center, but also a career counselor in my own right, as I've been doing it for years. And I'm going to be assisting Jackie as we talk about this topic today. And we welcome any and all questions on resumes and cover letters.
Yes. So as Nadira mentioned earlier, if you want to type something into the chat, we'll answer questions that way, or unmuting yourself and then remuting yourself after you ask the question. If anybody has a question, they're more than welcome to start. If we're kind of slow to start, we do have some preset questions and myths and things that we'll be talking about as it relates to resumes as well. How about, we'll start the first one off. Okay, so the first thing that I always get asked, I think whether it's in a presentation or during express hours or appointments, is like, does a resume have to be one page? And I think most of us have that conception that yes, we do have one-page resumes. Does anybody think otherwise? Shake your head for those of you who are, okay. So with that being said, I would say with resumes, for most college students at this stage in their life, in their undergraduate career, are probably going to be at a one-page resume. As you progress in your career and kind of move forward, 2 pages is absolutely okay, but it needs to be 2 pages of relevant information. And I would say also with that you need to have all your formatting and things done correctly and to warrant that second page. So with that being said, some kind of tips and tricks to help with that 1-page mark. Your margins can be 0.5 inches. Your font size anywhere between like 10 and 12 font size as well. So again, there's just a couple different things that you can kind of do to capitalize on that 1 page that I think a lot of students don't realize.
And I want to just tack on to that, and I can do a screen share if anyone has questions about formatting a resume, that we can include that in today's conversation. So we talk a lot about resume formatting when we're working with students, because the first thing we want you to do, undergrad, grad students, is just to get it all out. So when someone is just putting everything on their resume, they tend to go over that 1 page. But then we come back and we think about the formatting, like she said, the margins, the font size. I even go as far as to say the line spacing, making sure that's set to single, yes, because that's not default in Word. Word is default is 1.5, I want to say, line spacing. So when you're writing a paper, that's perfectly fine. When you're doing a resume, you want to control your space as much as possible. But we also have other formats such as right aligning dates. So sometimes it's just because someone has chosen to put everything, their job title, their employer, and then their date on a 3rd line, and we're trying to maximize the space. So there's some things we can move over to the right side of the page, or maybe utilizing tables and eliminating the lines from the tables for aesthetic. So there are some formatting pieces that we'd be glad to show you. I pulled it up, and I can always do a screen share if anyone has formatting based questions. Okay.
And format is very, very, very important. So something to add with that, like consistency. If you're going to bold the title of your job, kind of consistently do that. If you're going to right align your dates, consistently kind of do that. So just something to keep in mind. Format is really important. It is very important to have a visually appealing resume. If an employer has a stack of like 50 resumes that they're reviewing at, if it's not visually appealing, we probably won't look at it. So just something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, the way I like to put it is we feast with our eyes. So this is my comparison. Let's say for all the meat eaters, because I know we have some that are not meat eaters, but let's just say if you had a big juicy steak, right? It looked really good and it was served on the lid of a trash can. Would you want to eat it? The steak is great, but how you served it, I don't want that. Well, likewise, let's say someone is serving you fine china, but the steak looked like it had been rotting out in the sun for a few days. Would you want to eat that? Probably not. I'm hoping that everyone's answer is no, you would not want to eat rotting meat. So in that same sense, your content and your formatting is like your meat and the presentation of it. So they have to both align. Someone giving me a pretty document that has no content is just as empty as someone giving me a lot of information that's not formatted well. But the two have to align for your resume to truly be effective.
I kind of have a question.
Oh, yeah.
I can't tell. Yes, I am. Okay.
Yes, you are.
Hello. So would you say that it's better for formatting purposes to do it manually on like a Microsoft Word document, or are there like good websites that kind of do it for you and you just kind of put in the words?
Thank you, Bria. We appreciate
Love this.
That's one of the things we plan to talk about today. Jackie, I'll let you take it over first.
Oh, yes. So that was actually one of our next questions that we had prepared. Are resume templates good or bad? Should we be using them? And if I'm being completely transparent, no. You can absolutely create and format your own document on Microsoft Word very easily and very effectively. And if you have issues with that, please just meet with your career counselor. Come see us during Express or make an appointment. We'll talk about how to do that at the end. But there's a couple different reasons for that. And one, I think for formatting's sake, to make sure things are consistent and that they're your own, I think creating your own templates, the easiest way to have control over that and to make sure it's done in a way that you want it to be and that's effective. I think number two is a lot of times downloaded templates or things from Google Docs or Word, they're not formatted well, or they're not easily like updated or uploaded online for like jobs and things like that. And also they don't always utilize your space effectively. So kind of what we were talking about, if you want to keep it on one page, some of those formattings have huge margins or they space things out really weird or interesting. So in general, I really think creating your document kind of from scratch and having it be your own, and also UNCW students in particular love this one downloadable template from Word. And I promise you, in the last 2 years I've worked here, I've probably seen it at least 100 times. And it really just is not the most effective template that we recommend.
Yeah, and adding on to that, just I've seen a lot of templates in my time, and templates take away, like she said, your control, takes away the formatting control, but also the templates that I've seen have been difficult to edit. So the one that she's referring to from Microsoft Word that we've seen time and time again, but let me backtrack. Here's what I feel about templates. They're not always designed for what the individual needs. So a template is a set document. In other words, I say put it here, this is where you put it. And so if you can't move that around and make it effective for you, that's one of the main reasons why I don't like templates. An example of that would be for a college student that is graduating, your education is a qualifier. So having your education at the bottom of your resume doesn't make sense. However, the vast majority of templates will put them there. Well, if someone is a professional and has been in their field for some time and their work experience speaks for itself, their education at the bottom actually does make sense for them. Maybe they graduated 5-10 years ago and they've been working for that time frame. It's not their degree that's determining their qualifications, it's usually their amount of experience. So a template doesn't mean it's wrong, it's just not always the most effective for a college graduate or a student that's looking for an internship. So when we're making the recommendation not to use them, we're not trying to make life harder. I know it'd be much easier if we could find a good set of college student templates that were out there, but I guarantee you everybody's resume would then start looking exactly alike. And then that takes away the creativity that employers do like to see. And sometimes, again, people rely a little bit too much on templates to determine this and only this is what you can add. Well, if you don't have that kind of experience, or let's say if a template was asking for work experience, but someone didn't have work experience yet, now they're like, well, do I have to put work experience on my resume? Well, no, not if you don't have it. The same would be for organizations and things of that nature. So having people think through these topics, all of what you have done, and putting them in a category that makes sense for you is what we would rather work on. Now, that being said, let me address the elephant in the room. I know people are going to use templates anyway. We've been saying it for so long that don't do it, and they come back with the same template. So we know it's going to happen. My recommendations for templates would go as follows. Make sure it's one that you can download and edit. If you have to pay for it, I'm not going to make that recommendation. We can help you develop a great resume for free. Please don't pay for it. If you do, know that the Career Center is, if we come behind a paid for resume and make recommendations, I feel really bad that you've paid money for a document that is not necessarily working for you. So I've had that conversation before. But make sure it's something you can download, that you can edit it, that you can move content around, that you can even change the style, the formatting, the colors. All of those things are something that you can edit on the document itself, in which case that's not going to be the worst template ever. But if it's a template that you can design it on their website, but then you have to pay to download, like that doesn't make sense for you to go through all that trouble and then have to pay money in order to get it. I've seen that happen to a student or 2 or 3 in my time as well. So.
Hello, I have a question. I'm gonna graduate in May, so I would like to know if there is any difference between the grad and undergrad resume, or should I keep my old resume and just put my education
Yeah,
on top?
that's a good question. So the graduate student resume and undergraduate student resume do not differ very, very much. The slight differences that I have seen would be in the amount of experience that a graduate student tends to have that an undergraduate student might not have. So a graduate student, if they have more relevant experience, are actually more apt to have a two-page document. Again, as Jackie said earlier, we're talking about 2 pages of relevant information. So again, a graduate student is more likely to have that. But with your education, you're just going to continue to add into that section. If you're about to graduate from a graduate program, then your education is still your qualifier. So education goes still back up to the top. So that's another recommendation. Anyone that's in school and they're graduating and using that degree to get to their next step, I recommend education to be towards the top of their resume and not towards the bottom. And again, outside of that, unless you're getting completely different experiences from undergrad, let's say there are some graduate students that have clinical experiences that they may not have had in undergrad. So they might create a new section called clinical experience that they didn't have before. Some others may only have additional work experience or internships, in which case they can just expand their work experience and internship or relevant experience section. So in the look of a graduate resume, it's not extremely different. We just see more content, more relevant content, less of a need to expand on leadership or community service, because the relevance of what they're doing is much deeper in a graduate program and they don't have to rely on that to fill out their document.
That's what I was going to add on to, is that like if you're part of like clubs or organizations and that leadership, the community service, you might have them on your resume, but maybe you don't have those bullet points anymore because there's not necessarily a need to hone in on those experiences, because you're going to have maybe a graduate assistantship, maybe you're teaching, or that work experience might hold a little bit more weight than some of those experiences that you had in undergrad. I know for me, when I was transitioning into grad school, once I had like 2 internships under my belt, my graduate assistantship, you know, a lot of that stuff from undergrad kind of fell to the bottom and then eventually started to phase out. So we do have a chat. Nadira, I'm going to let you answer this, but I'll read it. Is it recommended to use a modern format to help your resume stand out compared to a traditional format?
So that's a loaded question.
Yes,
And it's loaded on so many different ways. So in the sense of what Jackie had mentioned before, helping your resume stand out, I don't have anything against a modern resume. As with a lot of things, the modern resume took some time. And by modern, if someone doesn't know what we're talking about by modern, these are more like the column format, a little bit chunkier format resumes. So visually, they're a bit more appealing. But always remember my analogy from the trash can and the steak. Visually, it can be more appealing and hold less information. What I have seen traditionally with that modern style resume is, in order to make up for a lack of content, someone is putting it on a pretty format. And that is very transparent to recruiters. If they don't see the content, it doesn't matter what format it is in. So the modern style resume has its benefits there. And there are certain industries that a modern resume would lend better to. So for example, graphic design. So obviously, if someone is doing something like graphic design and showcasing your design abilities and maybe using Canva, I think it's the name of the site that can design things like the modern resume. So it makes sense there. But let's say if someone is in nursing or even in teaching, these are very traditional fields, even business. These are a little bit more traditional of fields outside of maybe marketing and business. But the traditional resume lends more to what those recruiters are used to seeing, what they want to see, to make it easier for them to get to what they're looking for and not have to search around. Another reason why, when I look at a modern resume and I'm looking at what that person is trying to accomplish, I also think about applicant tracking systems. So I don't know if you've heard of ATSs before. If you've never heard of them and this is your introduction to them, let me just let you know that they are very real. These are essentially computer programs that employers enable to sift through their candidates. And essentially it bumps out a score based upon the match of that candidate's resume to what their position is. And this is really a keyword match. So if they're saying I need someone that's good in these 10 things, how does this resume match up in talking about these 10 things? And if you are not matching your resume to the position, it will kick you out with a low score. And the recruiter or hiring manager or whomever can essentially just go in and look at those that have the top score. So if you're wondering why I don't hear back from this employer, that's one of my first questions. How does your resume match up? Because whether they're doing it visually, that's essentially what they're doing when they're looking at resumes anyway, right? They're looking for keywords and seeing how that person matches up. Or if they're using an applicant tracking system, and there are quite a few out there. The modern format tends to use a lot of JPEG images. So the words aren't read by an applicant tracking system. If you're using a table, and by table in this case, I'm not referring to a columnized table that Word can do. I'm referring more to like that JPEG kind of design table, the image that looks really nice, almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? You can do them in Excel. The word will come to me in a second. But so if you're using that format, then you're showcasing to someone that might be reading your resume, like, oh, look, I can design this, and here's a tape, is this the formatted table that looks really pretty, showcasing how I've increased this amount over a certain amount of time, maybe made a certain amount of money for a company over a certain amount of time. Well, that looks pretty, but if the applicant tracking system is looking for that word, it won't pick up on that. So that's why I have to have that conversation with someone. Like, looks might be great. If you're going to be meeting someone, maybe going to a career fair or taking it with you to your interview, or somehow you know you're going to interact with somebody, maybe you have that modern format with you because you know that they can look through it and they can see the content. If you're uploading this to a website for them to review later on, my recommendation is the traditional format is never frowned upon. No one is looking at a traditional format saying that was not enough. As long as the content is great and the formatting is consistent, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. I'm here.
Okay.
I have one more question about the design of the CV or the resume. Does it differ from if I'm applying for an internship or if I'm applying for a volunteering opportunity? Should I change the design or the way that I'm using the font or whatever, or just keep it the same? If it's the same, like for all the opportunities or for the same job.
So if I'm hearing correctly, you're wanting to know if you should change up the font and design for the kind of positions you're applying for?
Not the position, but I mean the opportunity itself. If it's an internship, if it's a job, like if I'm applying for part-time internship or full-time job or volunteering opportunity, should I change the design? Is it different?
I didn't know if Jackie you wanted to chime in, Jackie?
I mean, so I kind of have something with that. I really think it's a kind of a loaded question because I really think it depends on what you're applying for. Is it something that's within the same industry, or is it a different industry? So what I always kind of think about when I apply for any type of position is thinking about relevancy. So how I order or organize my resume is by relevancy. So at the top of my resume, I'm going to have like the most relevant things, and I'm going to kind of consistently move down. And I would say it would go the same in this case, depending on what you're applying for. You might like manipulate your sections. You might organize it a little differently to have the most appealing, most relevant things appear at the top of your resume. In terms of like format and like color and things or any of that stuff, I don't necessarily know if you have to like change it. I just think it all depends on like what industry you're applying for. Are they similar type positions? But I also will say that you definitely will probably have multiple versions of your resume, or you can have multiple versions of your resume. I know I do. So all throughout like undergrad and grad school, I worked in different restaurants and things like that. And I wouldn't turn in the same exact resume for those positions as I would be for like my internships or my jobs and things like that as well. So I really just think it depends on, what you're applying for. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is how you're organizing it and having relevant information kind of displayed at the top and then moving down.
Okay.
In that same light, I'm going to make the recommendation of having a master resume, and I put that in quotation because when I say resume, it'll be formatted as you would have your resume formatted, but the content will continue to grow. A master resume may be more than 2 pages. It's you taking stock and keeping track of everything that you've done. But when you're ready to apply for your experience, whether it's an internship, a full-time job, or a part-time job, you can come in and tailor up that document, take out what's not needed, condense what's not needed, so that you're only using what you need to apply for that job and you're not sending them the master resume every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, should I add my school projects to my resume? It's not actually a real project, but it was a project for a nonprofit organization, but we didn't get it like in real business life. Can I add that or no?
I'll gladly take this one, Jackie.
Yes, you do it. She
One
got
of my passionate
excited.
topics. So I am a big believer in leveraging what you are doing in your education as your experience. Your college education is designed to be hands-on. So although it is not a paid experience, it may not be listed as an internship class or something of that nature, a service learning project, a classroom project where you're able to delve into the elements of your degree, of your field. Maybe you're learning technology, you're learning techniques, you're working with people. There's so many different things that you do in your classroom-based projects or your community service learning projects that are just as valuable to an employer as an internship or a job would be. So particularly when I'm working with a student that may not have had an internship just yet, or they're applying for an internship, or maybe they happen to be close to graduation and they never got that internship, they've had to work jobs in order to pay their way through school. Like, I understand that concept too. So I'm going to talk about your class projects. How do we leverage your project so that you're getting the most out of your education and showcasing your ability? Now, classroom projects could tend to be overwhelming for a resume too. So I'm not mentioning put every class project on your resume. This is where the tailoring comes back into play. So as you're applying for a position and maybe they're talking about an element or a technology or a technique of working with clients or students or something of this nature, and you're like, you know what, that major project that I had, the capstone project that I had, I really worked with all of that, highlight that project. Or maybe you have two, but you don't have to talk about every project you've ever done in all classes, just highlight the ones that are going to be the most relevant for that job.
Okay, so what I should add actually under the project, like what the points that I need to add. The project was for a nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm.
It was an application, a mobile application for the organization in order to enhance their services. So what points that I need to add? It wasn't a real project, but it was just an idea with a graphic design.
Yes. So I would say when you're any class project like the one that you are describing, you would highlight it very similar to how you would highlight a job. So approach the class project like it was a job. Talk about what you did from the design concept, the communication concept. If this was a project you had with other people, like a group project, how you interacted together, like how you were able to bring that together. Your bullet points about that project will talk about what you actually did up until the end of the conception of it. So they didn't actually take it on. So maybe this was, and that, the School of Business has a very similar concept in one of their classes. So a company has a concept, they want you to work towards it. So essentially they're working towards this idea for this company. So everything you work up until the idea actually coming to fruition, you're highlighting in your bullet points. So it's harder for me to tell you right now what I can recommend to anyone in this session. We do have Resumania tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow is Wednesday from 1 to 5 p.m. So I'll go ahead and put in a plug for that, because what's going to be much easier for questions such as that would be looking at your actual resume. Let me see what you have. Let's talk through your project a little bit. What did you actually do? And then we can hone in on how many bullets you might want to use to actually highlight that particular project. So that's really going to depend upon every person. I don't have there's no set number of bullets that you should have for any one job or project. It's just about how you can get it across as concisely, but as detailed as possible.
I would agree. And I'm just going to add in like a quick thing that you already said, but just to reiterate that when you have like the course projects or things, like I love seeing that on there, because again, you're doing so many things in your courses that is really relevant information that employers don't always know that you're doing. My biggest thing with that is you're not necessarily describing the nature of the class or the description. Like exactly what Nadira said, you were talking about what you specifically did in that course, in that project. So again, you're not just like listing like the class and underneath it like a description of that, because I see that all the time too. What I really want to see is like what you physically actually did for that. So just to throw that out there to kind of enhance that.
And if you don't mind, Jackie, I'm going to do a quick screen share to look at the career planning guide. I have an example pulled up. It's not going to be the best one, but I just wanted you to be able to see an example. So in this relevant experience section on this particular resume, and this happens to be a chemistry student, but I want to note a couple of things. Their relevant experience includes a class project as well as a directed independent study. But look at the format. So it has the title of what it was. So for you, it would be the title of the project. You can say University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and maybe for you, you want to dash out the actual site that you did this for, since there was an external site involved. And then there are several bullets underneath that start with the action verbs that describe what you did in that particular project. So, and then there are dates. Most of the time I do recommend the month year to month year format, or you can use the semester year format as long as it's consistent, because this is a class project we're talking about, as the dates for that particular time frame that it took for you to do that. So that's, when I say outline a class project, this is the format that I am referring to. It does not have to look any different than this, which is a very traditional resume format. We go back to the question about the modern versus the traditional resume.
That's really cool, because I was confused a little bit about it, because there was no any real outcome. So I was wondering how I can add this to my resume.
Yeah. Well, if you think about the work that we do, like, as long as you're on a job, you're working towards the outcome. If you think about it that way. So the time frame that you're working started January 2018, and I'm still currently working. I'm technically still working towards my quote unquote outcomes. So think about it from that standpoint. It's the activity that you do. It's not always the outcome. It's the actual things that you do while you're working towards that outcome that matter as well. A lot of people want to give just this was the result, but tell me what you actually did to get through the result. That's where that can help you with your bullet points. All right, looks like we have a couple of questions coming through in the chat, so yay. One, is it recommended to use the exact words from the job description in your resume and cover letter to get keywords picked up through the applicant tracking system? Again, I'll gladly take this one if you don't mind, Jackie. You get, okay. So it gets a little tricky. If you have done the exact same thing, then using exact words makes sense. Does that make sense? So if they're saying they want someone that's proficient in Microsoft Excel, and you have worked in Microsoft Excel, I need for you to highlight to me how you've worked in Microsoft Excel. However, if you're just repeating what they have in their job description in your resume without proving that you've actually done it, it becomes empty. And trust me, it's very obvious to see something that's empty. So for example, the skills section of a resume, I'll see a lot of the skills highlighted, but then below in the actual content, so in your work experience or any kind of experience you're highlighting, internship, class projects, you're not telling me how you have that skill. It looks like you're just telling me you have that skill because you want to match it to my job. So yes, you want to match it, but you want to back up what you're matching. Tell me in a bullet point how you actually used it, instead of just saying, I'm proficient in Microsoft Excel. How? That's going to be my next question. Just saying it is only half the battle. And if I have two clients or two applicants, one of them says I'm proficient in Microsoft Excel and the other one says I'm proficient in Microsoft Excel because I did XYZ, the person that did XYZ is going to get rated a lot higher than the person that just told me they were proficient. So this is why, this is the difference between the entry-level resume and someone that's had some training with their resume. So it's going to get you noticed a little bit more. Anything to add?
I would just say, with that being said, you definitely do want to tailor your resume and your cover letter to the positions that you're applying for. So you might not be using the exact words kind of throughout, but you definitely want to have different versions of your resume to kind of help yourself stand out. It is really, really easy to tell when somebody hasn't taken the time to tailor their resume, or especially their cover letters. Oh my goodness. I see a lot of really cookie cutter cover letters, and I can tell there was no time and effort or research kind of embedded into that. So that being said, yes, you do want to through the keywords and stuff like that as well, but just in your bullets and your descriptions, and then again, that formatting and how you're organizing your resume really should be geared towards certain positions. And then we have another question. So would you say that it is more important to include class projects rather than just listing the names of the relevant courses that you have taken? So I would say for me personally, yes, I would rather see course projects. That being said, if you're listing a couple courses and then maybe you're expanding on like one or two of those projects, I would say that's also okay to do as well. Space is of the essence, so you're definitely not going to, go into detail on every single one of those classes that you're taking. So again, it's not a bad thing to have the relevant courses, but I do think to provide that depth and to really enhance your resume, maybe expanding on those key ones, I think could really provide a lot more.
And only thing that I will add to that is I've seen 3 different levels of how people represent their coursework on their resume. Level 1 is listing the relevant courses. So if you have a relevant coursework section and here are 3 or 4 relevant courses that you've taken, oftentimes the title of those courses are indicative of what you did inside of them. So if they have strong titles, listing your relevant coursework does make sense. But these are courses relevant to what you're applying for. So that's another fluid section that's not stationary. It will change with each job or each position that you're applying for, potentially. Level 2 of relevant coursework, I've seen people take those same classes and in a separate section, rather than just saying, here's a class, they'll say, here's a class dash, here's a short statement of what I gained in this class. So they might have 4 relevant courses and 4 short statements beside each of them that say, I gained this, I gained that, I gained that. Okay, good. At least I know you have something that you gained out of that class. Then level 3 of relevant coursework are the projects. So not just here's a class and this is what I gained. This is an exact project that's geared towards what you are looking for in your own organization. So that's why not everyone may have gotten to the class project stage yet. And if they want to represent relevant coursework, they have different ways that they can possibly do it. But if anyone is ever looking to up the ante, I come to the project based coursework. Like look at your projects within your classes and not just what you gained overall.
I would agree.
Kind of going back to the whole skills, like relevant skills thing that you might see listed in a job description. Is it better to have a special section of just like all your relevant skills and it says, oh, proficient in WordPress or proficient in, this is just stuff for my communication, whatever. But is it better to have that or to like have them kind of all throughout depending on like other sections and like have them in a full sentence? I don't know if I said that coherently, but yes.
Yes.
I don't know who's starting.
No, like Jackie, like
Yes.
you both want to get. Do you want to talk about it, Jackie?
Well, I was just going to say, so my thing with the skill section, if you're listing out skills like leadership or time management or things like that, like kind of what Nadir was saying earlier, like really anybody can say they have those things, but if you're not backing it up or providing that evidence, I kind of look at those skills and I honestly look at them and say, says who, so what? But to me, I would rather see those skills embedded into your position. So that second part, I would rather you showcase and provide evidence for how you have that skill set. So talk to me about how you have leadership, that time management, that critical thinking. Those pieces show up a lot better. More of those soft skills show up a lot better in statements underneath your positions. I think a skill section can be really helpful if it's more like technical, like hard skills. So like software, like technology. I worked with a student the other day who was like, I don't know, like it was like geology and they were doing all this stuff with like labs and like rocks and all this special equipment. Sometimes you can't really provide that evidence. You either have that skill set or you don't. So it was actually really helpful for them to have that skills section that was listing the technology, the lab equipment and the software that they were really proficient or they were that they were able to use well. Whereas again, soft skills, I would much rather see that embedded into your positions so you can provide that evidence piece.
Yep. And adding on to that, this has been my experience with the skill section. First and foremost, the skill section is optional. So there are quite a few sections that are optional on a resume. Profile statement, an objective statement, a skill section. They're not ones that you have to have. But there are some, as Jackie mentioned, she's over here in my chat, so I keep pointing over there. So as Jackie mentioned, there are certain programs that have a lot of hard skills, technical skills that are actually every program does, but some people it's a lot easier for them to see that skill versus others that focus more on the soft skills like communication. So you mentioning WordPress as an example, that's a hard skill. So but telling me again, WordPress in the skill section is only level 1. So if someone gave me a skill section and they listed off, my rule of thumb is 9 to 12. I usually will tell people that think of 9 to 12 hard skills, things that they can definitely use in this company outside of your soft skills, and you will have a really good, strong skill section. But that's only a part of it. A skill section is a summary. So it's you telling them, if they didn't read anything below in your resume, what would you not want them to, what do you want them to know about you, period? That's what you have in your skill section or your summary of qualifications even. If they did not read anything below, what is it that you truly want to capture about yourself? What do you bring to the table? That's how that's looked. But now prove to me that you have it. So if you're telling me WordPress is a skill of yours, then there's a bullet somewhere below that's telling me how you use WordPress. if someone is saying communication is a skill of mine, then there's something below that's going to tell me how they've used their communication skills. So a skill section is not a standalone section. Outside of a technical skill section or an equipment section that some degree programs do lend towards, like it's a lot harder to say every single time I know how to use this lab equipment, but maybe they have a relevant coursework section that has a lot of labs in it, and now they also have a technology or an equipment section that's highlighting the skills from that lab. So that can be very personal to someone in different programs. I just know that a skill section is not meant to be a standalone section. It's meant to be a summary section, but it's always optional because, as Jackie mentioned, if it's below in your bullet points, it's captured. They see what they need to see.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we got a question about the cover letter, and I was just about to say, in the time that we have, we may want to get to the cover letter a little bit. So the question is stated, can you elaborate more about the cover letter? Yes. In the past, I've added the company address, stated the position and interest in the company in the beginning, kept the middle section the same because I was applying for the same position at different companies. Is that still cookie cutter? And what are some tips to show your true interest in a specific company? So I have been talking a lot too, so I kind of get it back to Jackie a little bit. I know she has some things that she want to say about the cover letter too.
Yes. So, I mean, I think in general, having like kind of that general cover letter format that you're going to make changes and adaptations to, especially if it's, again, similar positions across different companies, I think that's fine, but you definitely want to tweak the wording around. And what I really like to see in cover letters that I don't always see is like, why this company? Like, what is it about this company that makes you want to work there? Showcasing that you've done some of your research. One tip that I typically have for students that I've worked with in the past is look at them up on LinkedIn. A lot of times companies will post things that they're really proud about or really excited about on LinkedIn that you could mention in there. So again, trying to make it personable and trying to build that connection through that cover letter. A lot of times we see the same thing over and over and over again. So anytime you can embed that research or build that connection, I think that just makes it even stronger. Keeping that the same. I mean, that's my biggest advice on that. We do have on that career planning guide that we have online, we do have not necessarily a template, but it kind of showcases different ideas and things that you might want to embed in each one of those in each one of those sections. So that beginning piece is really, the interest in the company, how you heard about the position. That could be another really great way to build connection. If that was through a recruiter that you met, did you see them at a career fair? Is it someone that you know that works there? Again, make sure it's okay for you to name drop because you want to make sure those people will say something good about you. I had someone name drop me once and I didn't have good things to say about them. So that was very interesting. So again, just keep that in mind. I think that's another way that you can build connection. And I think the other piece too, to make sure that this isn't necessarily cookie cutter, to me, is providing specific examples throughout your cover letter. I can't stress that enough. It is really, really easy to say, I am great at this. I have technical skills. I'm organized. Like, I'm all these great things. But again, similar to what we were saying earlier, a lot of times people aren't providing that evidence. So they're not giving me a specific example. So if you're going to make a claim, I have developed really great leadership and teamwork skills. I'm awesome at this. Give me a for example. In my internship position at so-and-so, I did this. So again, that's just another way that you can kind of mimic that job description and really showcase and enhance the skills that they're looking for. Again, I think it's really all about building that connection and doing some of that research. So you're really enhancing that document so it doesn't feel like you're sending a one-size-fits-all document to each employer. I will also add in there, because I know I'm talking a lot, is cover letters are specific to the companies, and you're going to have different versions. And yes, they are a lot of work, but it is really effective. I will say, when I have two really great resumes and I have two cover letters, the one that really does or puts in that time and puts in that work, that one's going to help stand out a lot more to me.
Wonderful, Jackie. Wonderful. Oh, go ahead, Bria. So you have.
No, you're good. You're good.
He's my boss, so I always appreciate that.
So then, kind of going on, I feel like maybe you answer this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So if I'm searching, I'm kind of submitting my resume to like job search engines like Indeed or something like that, and the cover letter is optional, would you say to always try to include that cover letter?
Very tricky. I know I always respond with that, but I've been in this field long enough to know that it's no cookie cutter answer to that. So above everything, follow the instruction given by the employer. That is one thing that I have learned. So if they say submit the resume to this site, submit your resume, because that's what they're going to want and that's what they're going to use. So some people will save the resume and cover letter as the same document. Well, that's not technically what they asked for. So in some companies, they have been very specific. They didn't submit what I asked for, and therefore they don't follow instruction. Therefore, I don't want to consider this candidate. So if you have someone extreme, you don't know who's that extreme. I've just had conversations with recruiters that have talked to me about that extreme. So I know there are some that think on that wavelength. Now, there are others that will have websites that will allow you to upload your resume here, upload additional documents here. Your cover letter can be an additional document. So some of them might say upload resume here, upload cover letter here, upload letter of recommendations here, and others might just say upload resume, upload additional documents. So your cover letter or anything else that you want to submit to them can be uploaded as an additional document. So you really have to look at the instructions that they give. If their instructions are vague, every now and again will run across very vague instructions, then you can take a little bit of the control of yourself and go ahead and submit them as one. But otherwise, please follow the instruction with that. I just want to make sure you get in consideration for the position.
Yes.
And I always just like to add in, if a cover letter is optional and you're going to submit one, submit a good cover letter. Like, put the time and effort. Like, don't have it again be just that generic cover letter just to put it out there. So for me, in that case, I remember when I was job searching, which, man, it feels like forever ago. But I know for me, I really, even if they were optional, if I was going to submit one, I really took the time to showcase that, I did my research, that I understood the organization that I was applying for, and that I really mimicked, again, a lot of the things that they stood for. Because to me, if you're going to submit something, just have it add value to your application. And if you don't feel like your cover letter is strong or is going to add value, then I probably wouldn't submit it. Because again, that could hurt you if you didn't put that time and that effort to write one that is effective in enhancing your resume and enhancing your application.
Absolutely. And in a moment that we have, time that we have left, and please, if you have other questions, either chat them or be prepared to ask. But I like to demystify the cover letter a little bit. I do this in my appointments. If anyone has ever met with me for a cover letter appointment, this will sound very familiar to you. That number one, I demystify the header. So we have in our career planning guide, what we have is professional letter, a professional document, professional letter. So the way it's formatted is a specific format for that reason, because that's a professional letter format. It's traditional. It is widely accepted. No one is going to look down upon that. If you want to have a more modern cover letter, you take the header from your resume, whatever you've designed, and you tack it to the top of your cover letter. So it replaces the top of the traditional header format. And that's because most cover letters, I don't know if I've actually heard of any anymore, are no longer being mailed out. So that is widely acceptable to do that. You try to make sure you address it to a person. So the to whom it may concern is way too vague. You want to find the person's name, do a little bit of research. If you're not able to find the person's name, then at least go with what I call vague specific. I have no other title for it. So say attention hiring committee or XYZ position recruiter or something of that nature. So at least it's going to a group of people or someone that's more likely to see it, not just to whom it may concern, like anybody could apply for it. Paragraph 1, I call the ego stroke paragraph. So as Jackie described, tell me what you're applying for, how you found out about it, but tell me why you're interested in my company and why you're interested in my position. If you cover those 2 whys in that first paragraph, I will feel like you have some connection. So telling me that you're moving back to the area is not my why. That's your why. It's not my why. Why should I hire you? Not because you're moving back home. I need to know what is it that you bring. So like, for example, with that one, if you're moving back home, you have a really good sense of the needs of this community and you want to give back to the community and you know that they're heavily involved. Okay, you've made a connection now. It's not just about I want to move home and you're a job in my area. It's more about I know that this is what I can bring to this company. I've gone away for school and now I'm bringing this back to my community. That's a wonderful connection to make back to a company, not just I'll be moving to the area, right? So then we get into the second paragraph, or sometimes the middle paragraph is 2. That really just depends on how much someone has to talk about. But it answers one question in paragraph format, and I cannot iterate that enough. There should not be any bullet points or any tables on a cover letter. Bullets and tables are for the resume, not for the cover letter. But it answers, how have my previous experiences, i.e. what's on your resume, prepared me for this role? So it will reference what you've talked about in your resume, but it should not just repeat it verbatim. If you're going to make mention of an experience that you had, this is exactly what Jackie said. Tell me now how this experience is going to shape what you bring to the table for me. That's what the cover letter is supposed to do. So not be repetitive, but to make sense of it. It takes out the subjectivity. If they're looking at your resume, it's up to them to decide that what I've seen is enough. Now you're able to tell them like how it is enough for them. So use that to the best of your ability. And then the final paragraph, I call that one the Southern hospitality. Let people know what that is. Thank you for your time and consideration. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you, XYZ, XYZ. So you don't have to go into a lot of detail in the final paragraph, but if you want to add a little bit more, you can reiterate and restate your interest and your desire. Make sure you restate how you can be contacted. Another tip that I have, 2 tips that I have for cover letters, just like in regular writing, try to avoid an overuse of I statements. How you reframe your sentences will help you a lot there. So it is a document all about you. So the tendency can be to say, I have, I will, I do, I. So it does read really repetitive in that sense. And also words like hope, believe, and wish, although they are good words, these are not words for your cover letter. Your cover letter should be very definitive about your experiences. If you're saying, I hope to hear from you, no. I look forward to hearing from you. Take out the hope there. I believe my experiences qualify me. No, my experiences qualify me for this position. So take out that ambiguous wording so that it doesn't look like you're unsure about your qualifications for this role. It looks more like you're ready for the role.
So one thing I'm going to quickly add, just one thing that I always like to think about with resumes or cover letters are 2 different things that are always in my forefront. Number one is these documents are about you, but they're not for you. So you should always have that employer in mind when you're submitting these documents. So like what Nadira was saying, it's not about you wanting to move home. It's about what you can kind of bring to that employer. So again, keeping that in mind. And then number 2 is just always thinking about the value that you can bring to an employer and what you bring to the table. That should always be at the forefront of your mind when you're creating these documents. And I know when I'm meeting with students, when they're struggling to think about what they want to put in there, that's what I ask them. What value do you bring me? That's the first question I ask them. And then they'll be like, well, I did this. I'm really great at this. Great. Like those are the things that you should be providing evidence for and showcasing. So it says, again, you want to stand out from the other applicants, and you can do that by the value and the experiences that you bring and just being able to articulate that. But we have 2 questions. So the first one, if you're applying for a technical position, is it necessary to include extracurricular clubs and activities that you've been involved in, or just focus on including technical skills? Or focus on including, so that's kind of a harder question, because I think it's a combination of the 2, but also I think it's going back to kind of what I said earlier about relevant experience. So making sure that relevant experience is really well highlighted. On my resume, my relevant experience takes up like 1/3 of mine's 2 pages, but it takes up like almost like a full page of information. And then the things that I have at the bottom that are kind of just filler, or they're not necessarily the highlight of it, I do start to phase those things out. So I think in this case, make sure you are highlighting those technical skills really well, and that you're not taking away from that section, but you can still include some of that stuff too. So it's not like an either or. I just kind of think it's, do you have space to still highlight some of those things? But kind of what we said earlier with like changing margins, like font size, there really is a way to capitalize on your space if you want to showcase all of that. Cool. And then the other question, so when using online applications, should we copy and paste what is on our resume in the experience section? Nadira, I'm going to let you answer that, because you'll probably have a way better answer than me.
Probably not. It's probably the same answer. I have applications are another one of those things. We could probably do a completely separate webinar on just making sure we fill out applications thoroughly, because there are a lot of people who don't move on to the next step in the process because an application is incomplete. But to answer this wonderful question, if it allows you to just add in a little text box, I don't see any reason why you would not remain consistent with what you have on your resume to what you're putting in your application. So if they're saying, what are your previous jobs in that job application form, then just copy and paste from your resume over into the document. Make it easy for yourself. What I love about more modern application processes is that they will allow you to log in via LinkedIn. And as long as you have a good LinkedIn account, plug for LinkedIn, which is going to be coming up on Thursday. So if you have a really good LinkedIn account, it'll auto-populate all of that for you, and you don't have to retype it all or copy and paste it all. So it's another good reason to have a well done LinkedIn page. but otherwise a copy paste should be sufficient. You want it to be consistent. Another reason why I recommend that consistency, just again, depending upon the company, what system that they're using, which you tend to not know, a lot of them use that system to screen applicants, but the actual hiring managers or recruiters, they're looking at the resume. So you want the two to be consistent, because if you've got a really well-developed resume, you don't want to come to that application and only enter in half of the information, but that's what they're using to screen their applicants. And you, again, you won't know that. So that consistency can be helpful there too.
I would agree with that. Being on hiring committees and things like that, I do go straight to the resumes and cover letters, but once I have like my top candidates, I will reference their application later. That's also another tidbit that I like to add in here too, is like, yes, you submit resumes and cover letters. I always look at resumes first because they are so much easier for me to glance at and look through and pick out key information. And then if I like you, I will go to your cover letter, because that takes a little bit more time. That might be different for some people, but I just like to keep that in mind, that your resume really is important. And I have a lot of students that will be like, well, I wrote about it in my cover letter, so I don't have it in my resume at all. Don't do that.
Yeah. I just referenced that for somebody else. Definitely make sure your cover letter is a summary document. So your resume is already a summary about your experience. This is what the document is. But your cover letter further summarizes your experiences to be directly relevant to the position. So if you're talking about something in your cover letter that was never mentioned in your resume, that meant you didn't go into any detail about this particular thing. That's the first thing that I noticed. And although not everybody will read a cover letter, it's pretty guaranteed that everybody's going to look at a resume. So I would not talk about something in the resume that's not already in the cover, in the cover letters. I would not talk about something in the cover letter that is not already in the resume. So when you reference it in your cover letter, they can go to your resume and see the more detail about that particular experience.
Yes. So any last minute question before we kind of wrap up? We probably have time for like one more.
Alex, we're not able to hear you. Not now. Chat it for us if you can. I don't know what happened, but no, we weren't able to hear you.
Oh, I can.
He is typing up his. Want me to go ahead and give the plug for appointments?
Yes.
That way. So just want to let you guys know, replug for Resumania. Again, if you're available tomorrow between 1 and 5, you can do a quick chat with a career counselor, have your resume reviewed. You can also schedule an appointment to meet with a career counselor via your Handshake account. So just log into Handshake, click on the appointments tab, then visit your school, and just follow the prompts from there. You can schedule an appointment. Most of us will have either 30 or 60-minute blocks for resumes and for cover letters.
Yes. And then we also do have virtual express hours every day between 2 and 4. So if you want to drop in, it'll be via Zoom as well. And the meeting ID and information is on our website. And again, those are just quick 15 or so minute appointments to kind of help you with your resumes or answer any quick questions that you might have, just to be able to provide that for students, because usually we're like swamped during Express when we're in person.
Oh, okay. So the question is there a minimum or maximum number of job experiences we should list on our resume? Great question. Go ahead, Jackie.
So I would say no. Again, it's kind of what we said before with like relevancy and what you're applying for. It really is dependent. One thing, again, reference our career planning guide and look at some of those examples. I really think it's helpful to have a visual, but you can have a section on your resume where you have positions, where you have bullet points and you're describing what you've done. We also have seen additional experience where students are listing a job title to showcase that working history and like their dates they work there, but they don't necessarily have to have like bullet points and descriptions underneath there as well. So again, I don't think there's a minimum or a maximum, but I think it's all about relevancy. Kind of going back with this, how long ago were these jobs or positions? Was this a job that you had your freshman year of high school for a year, but you're a senior in college? Do you need to have that job on there anymore? So again, I really think it just depends, and it's based on relevancy and then other information that you have filling in that section. I will also say, like, an experience doesn't have to just be a job, right? So if I had a club or organization or a leadership position that holds much more weight and I'm developing much stronger of a skill set than my part-time job in high school, you can expand more on that as well. So again, it's a loaded question in that you have to kind of define experience to involve a lot of different things, A, and then B, what is relevant for the position or the industry that you're looking to go into.
And this is exactly, by the way, why we recommend getting your resume reviewed. We use the resource while you're here. We're also available to our alumni as well, but you know, alumni schedules tend to be a lot different than student schedules. Can you get back in? Can you do a virtual meeting? But using the resource while you're here, because we would talk that through. We would want to know exactly why do you have these listed here? Okay, let's de-emphasize these a little bit. Like Jackie was saying, let's eliminate some of the bullets here so that you can expand on that relevant organizational experience because it's much more applicable to what you're applying for. So if you're ever having problems figuring out what to include, what not to include, always think about a review, as well as knowing that employers they do value work experience, even if that work experience is not relevant to them. So the first thing they're going to look for is relevant experience to see if you've done an internship, the class projects, or what have you done that's relevant to my field. But they're also going to look for leadership experience that could come through those other experiences. They're going to look for some of those soft skills that may come through some of those other experiences. So club sports is a great way to showcase leadership and communication and all of these wonderful things. So you don't necessarily have to think, oh, that's not relevant, let me take it off my resume. You have to ask yourself how you're going to use it. That's when I look at it on someone's resume, my first question is, how are you going to use this? Clubs and organizations, good example of this. As an example, this was a very long time ago, but there was a nursing student that listed the nursing association on their resume. And I was like, okay, well, tell me what you've been doing in this association. They were like, well, I only joined because my teacher told me to join it. And I was like, I don't want you to talk about it like that. I was like, imagine you were applying to a hospital and the person interviewing you was the president of that organization when they were in school. And you were like, nah, I really didn't do anything. I just put it on my resume because they told me to. So anything on your resume, you have to think about it as game for a conversation. So that's how I'll leave that.
And I would also just say, I know Nadir already made the plug, but please get your resume reviewed. I promise you there's some form of feedback or constructive feedback that we can provide to you. And it's just really helpful to get a professional's eyes on it. I cannot preach that enough. I'm in the process of hiring interns for a position. And that's the first thing I said to them, go get your resumes reviewed and please resubmit them back to me. Because a lot of times students really do sell themselves short or don't really highlight their experiences in the best light. And we really want you to be able to do that effectively. It's really important. I would say now more than ever, when you're not necessarily having those in-person interactions, this really could be their first impression of you. So it is really important to really capitalize on that. Well. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate your attendance and then also the awesome questions that you had. Like we've been saying, if you have any others, please come to our express hours or make an appointment for us. We're really happy to help you with that. In general, not just on resumes, cover letters, really anything, job search, internship, interviewing, all that great stuff. We can provide support as well.
So many different topics. Visit our website if you want to know the kind of topics that we cover.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all.
Aww.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, have a good one.
Nadir, we had so many.